Melissa's Creations. Thank you so much for joining me today for this beautiful little card. Now, this is a very clean card, and it has a pop of color, and that white embossed sentiment on the black background just really stands out. These little pearls give it a fun little elegant touch. I'm so excited and love this card so much. I can't wait to show you how I made it. Let's get started. So we're going to start out with our little flower. Now to do that, the stamp set I'm using today is a Hostess Only Set background bits. We're using this gorgeous flower here, and we are using our Stampin' Write markers for the 2017-2019 in colors. We're actually going to use every single marker in this little pack on this stamp. So I have a scrap of Whisper White cardstock here, and I have my floral image. I'm going to take the lightest ink color first, and I'm simply going to take the thick end, and you can figure out which is the brush tip by this thick line versus the pen tip, which is the thin line. So I'm taking the brush tip, and I'm going to color in that stem first. And then I'm going to take my darker green, and I'm just going to color a little bit here and there on that leaf and stem, just to give a little bit of beautiful watercolor look, kind of texture and dimension. And now I'm going to take the lightest color of my pink and purple shades. I'm going to color in the middle and work my way out. So I'm going to color in the middle of this stamp here in kind of a starburst pattern. So I have that, and then I'm going to overlap it slightly with my berry burst. So go out a little bit farther from there. Again, using that starburst pattern, and just use a lot of lines up and down and overlap some of that pink in the middle. And finally, I'm going to take my darkest color, Fresh Fig, and I'm just going to do the tips. And again, in that starburst fashion, just go around and color in the rest of that stamp. All right, I'm going to give my block a huff to moisten all of the other ink, and then I'm going to stamp it down. And we are left with this gorgeous colored in flower. Now, I really enjoy coloring in my stamps with my markers. It just adds another dimension of color, and you can really get a lot of great uses out of your supplies when you use your markers as your stamping ink. Now I'm going to use my snips to cut this flower out. I'm going to start with the stem, and I'm going to cut fairly close because I really want a close image when I go to pop this up on the rest of my card. All right, I'm going to bring in my card base. Now this is a standard piece of Whisper White cardstock that was cut in half on the short edge. So this measures 4 1/4 by 11, and I have scored it in the middle at 5 1/2. So I'm just going to fold that in half and use my bone folder to get a crease. And we're going to do some stamping on here. So I have already mounted up the words from the stamp set I'm using, which is the Hostess Only Set background bits. We're using these words right here. I'm going to stamp those in Smoky Slate. Now, to help me position my stamp so that it looks like it's a continuous line of text, I'm going to use my Stamp-A-Ma-Jig. The Stamp-A-Ma-Jig is a positioning tool that is very useful if you are working with wood mount or the red rubber mount, clear mount stamps. These stamps are not see-through. They differ from our photopolymer stamps. So the Stamp-A-Ma-Jig is still a really valuable tool when you're trying to position these stamps in a very specific place. I'm going to, first of all, get my imaging sheet ready. Now your Stamp-A-Ma-Jig comes with 2 items, your actual Stamp-A-Ma-Jig tool and your see-through imaging sheet. There's 2 sides to this, a rough side and a smooth side. I will be using the rough or the matte side today. So I'm right-handed. You can also use this tool if you're left-handed by simply reversing the order. But I am right-handed, so my imaging sheet is on the right-hand side. I'm going to butt the corner of that sheet up into my Stamp-A-Majig. I have my stamp mounted here, so I'm going to ink that up. And I'm going to get my placement by stamping onto my imaging sheet. I'm lining up my block in the corner of my tool, and I'm going to stamp straight down and straight up. And that gives me my image. You can see that it is very light, but it is there. So now I'm going to use that to stamp onto my card base. I want 2 rows of this to go across the bottom of my card. So I am going to line up the text, and it may be a little difficult to see on the video, but I'm lining up the bottom line of text with the bottom line of my card. I'm going to place my Stamp-A-Majig on my card, and without moving it around too much, make sure that my position is still good. So right there looks good. So now I'm going to remove my imaging sheet, ink up my stamp again, and then I'm going to put that block into the corner, stamp it straight down and straight up, and there is my first position. I can do the same thing. Now, it may be a little tricky to position it this far off the page, so you may want to adhere your card down with some washi tape or even a sticky note to your work surface. So I'm just going to use a little bit of washi tape to stick my card front down. I'm going to finish placing my imaging sheet where I want the rest of that text to line up so that it matches the text I just stamped. Put my positioning tool back in place. Now you may want to use a piece of scratch paper under so you don't stamp on your workspace. I'm using a tile so I can clean this up easily just by wiping it off. I'm going to ink up that stamp again, and again place your stamp in the corner of your positioning tool. Stamp straight down and straight up, and you can see that we have a beautiful connection, and it is very, very cohesive. You can't see any lines or any disruption between the text. So I'm going to do the same thing again so that I have 2 lines of text. I'm going to line my imaging sheet up so that it is on top of the first line of text that I stamped. Put my Stamp-A-Majig in place, ink up my stamp, and line it up in the corner of my tool, stamp down and come up, and there we go. So now we just have one more to do to connect these together. Okay, put your imaging sheet down, line it up, get your Stamp-A-Majig in place, ink up, and stamp. And there we go. I'm going to remove that washi tape very carefully so that it doesn't rip my card front. Beautiful. And I'm going to set that aside so we can work on our sentiment. I have a scrap of basic black cardstock here and my sentiment that says, "You're always so thoughtful," again from our Hostess Only Background Bits stamp set. This stamp right here. I love this font. It is so gorgeous. I have my Whisper White craft stamping pad here. I'm using an embossing buddy on my black cardstock so that I can make sure that when I go to emboss it with my white embossing powder, I get a really nice and clean image. There's no little specks of embossing powder floating around. So I've inked up my stamp. I'm going to stamp that down. Give it just a second and light pressure. Use a folded piece of paper or a tray or container of some kind. Put on your white embossing powder and shake off the excess. And I'm going to use my heat tool to emboss. Now I'm going to trim my sentiment down so that it fits really nicely on my card. So it doesn't have an exact size. Just trim it so that it is tight around your sentiment. We are ready to assemble our card. We have our card base with our beautiful font at the bottom. I have my piece of basic black cardstock with my white embossing, and then I have my gorgeous little colored in flower. So I'm going to bring in my Stampin' dimensionals, both the regular and the little mini guys. I'm going to put a couple of the larger ones on the back of my sentiment and pop that up. And I'm going to put some of the minis on the back of my flower. And the finishing touch is to use some of our beautiful pearls to accent a few pieces on our card. So we're just going to scatter these pearls, large and medium, all over at the bottom of our card here. And there we are, creators. There is a beautiful card using one stamp set and a few additional materials and techniques. I hope you enjoyed this card today. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this card today. You can get all the supplies that you need to make this card on melissascreations.com. Just click on the Shop Now link or any of the images for the products that I used today. You can also visit me on Facebook at facebook.com/mcreations and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest with the handle @mcreations. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye!